Hello, thank you guys for showing up today. I'm so glad that everyone is here. I hope that we are all ready to learn a lot about misinformation. So first of all, I want to say welcome to the Misinformation Mash Up. This is an academic panel that's being produced by Wolfgram Memorial Library with faculty experts from Widener University. And these are experts in finding the truth in everyday life. So, today we are going to talk about misinformation. Merriam-Webster.com defines information as knowledge obtained from investigation, study, or instruction. So misinformation is when that knowledge is incorrect or misleading. And that can be accidental or that can be on purpose. So, in my profession, the Association of College and Research Libraries publishes a document called the Framework for Information Literacy. It's intended to guide our practice of teaching critical thinking towards information, both in the library and beyond in the real world. One of ACRL's core frames in this document emphasizes how information is constructed and contextual. That means it is also what it says on the paper, and it's given context by the world around it. So, here at Widener, where we encourage civic engagement, we hope that students leave with an interest in examining issues and advocacy for fairness. In this spirit, we've come together to share a diversity of perspectives from the faculty here on how the problem of misinformation shapes their research, their teaching, and their professional agendas, and what tools each of them rely on to evaluate the world around them. Thank you again for coming, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Adam, who is going to introduce our panelists.
Okay, thank you very much. That was Christina, the outreach lead here at Wolfgram Memorial Library. My name's Adam Mizell. I'm a research librarian and coordinator of information literacy. I'm really excited about today's panel. I'm going to get right to the point and introduce our first speaker. Professor of Social Work, Marina Barnett. The reason for my excitement is because after working here at Widener for 6 years, I've participated in a lot of faculty events, and I always knew when Professor Barnett had the floor, her values would shine through. And in communicating with her to plan this event, she shared a lot of thought-provoking points about the ethical responsibilities that professionals in social work face in vetting information in a way that protects clients and constituents. She's sensitive to the ways that even factual information can be massaged to support different points of view. So with that, I just want to say, Professor Barnett, thank you for being here. I hope this is the first step in a continuing working relationship.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Christina. It is absolutely my pleasure to share a panel with my two good friends, Angie and Wes. We've worked together doing political engagement at Widener for quite a while. And so how wonderful it is when we can join with friends to talk about a topic that we all think is very important. And so as a social worker, a lot of times people don't know what social work does. If you happen to come in while we were having a conversation, my own mother was kind of wondering, like, what are you doing? What are you going to do? And are you going to make enough money to be able to make a living doing what you want to do? And so a lot of times when people think about social work, they think of kind of the direct work that we do with individuals who are the most vulnerable in our country. And so a lot of that work is through income maintenance work or welfare recipiency, helping people to gain access to programs, helping people to understand the kinds of things that are available to them. We are all welfare recipients, let's be very honest. The fact that we participate on a university campus means that we get government assistance to be able to help our students to be able to attend so that they can come to our classrooms, to be able to access land, to even have our buildings on. All of those things are provided by the government. And so one of the first things that I have to start off with when I'm talking to my students is helping them to understand the ways in which government provides for the general welfare. If we go and look at our preamble, provides for the general welfare of all of its citizens. and to kind of take the value judgments away from the types of assistance that it gives, it's all assistance. It doesn't matter whether you're receiving it because you don't have food or you're receiving it because your farm is going under. It's all government assistance, all provided by taxes. And so helping students to debunk some of those myths about what social work is kind of where we start. Then we kind of move to helping them understand the multiple levels that we interact in. My profession, my area is in policy and in organizational development. And so I do a lot of work at the meso level, which is the administrative level, helping organizations be able to gain, just helping them to understand strategically where they need to be in the future, helping to write grants so that we can sustain those organizations and keep them running so that they can provide the wonderful services that they provide. And then at the macro level, it's helping to impact policy. And so what we talk about is how we use information throughout all of those levels of social work practice. And it really is important to be able to communicate to them that as professionals, and that's who we are, and we are a professional school of social work, as we prepare them to be professionals, we prepare them with a set of ethical values that require them to think about how they think, why they think that way, what they believe in, where that comes from, and then ultimately, what impact is that going to have on their clients? And so it's really important for them to be able to get inside of, you heard Christina talk about social constructions, to understand what their lens is. How is the world impacting them in a way that it shapes a worldview and provides information? Now, because these things are socially constructed, the way that I believe is based on what I'm interacting with. And so misinformation in and of itself depends on who the person is that's giving and receiving that information, right? And so I might believe in one thing and somebody else believes in another because of the way in which they've interacted in the world. Another difficulty that we have in trying to understand misinformation is just trying to manage the multiple sources of information that are coming at us every single solitary day. And so when I was in college, it was the book and what was in the book, and you didn't question books. God forbid, you never question books, right? These are things that are written down. And it was the professor, and you definitely, because of this belief that we have in respect of our elders, we didn't question in the way in which it might be more normative to question now. And so what we try to do is to get them to understand that there are multiple sources of information now. Students are getting information from the internet. Students are getting information from these 24-hour news cycles. Students are getting information. It's just they're being inundated with information, and my colleagues are much better and much more intellectually in tune with the ways in which that information comes than I am. But the impact is the same in terms of the fact that we're getting so much information, and we may not necessarily have the tools to be able to filter the information that helps us to determine whether or not this is factual. And the reason why I do this is because, remember, it's socially constructed. So what is a fact depends on my worldview, or whether it's misinformation. And so that's one of the places where we really do look to people like our librarians and say to them, okay, our students are writing papers. Help them to be able to find information that is unbiased and allows them to see the totality of the problem that they're trying to understand. And so it's not my job as a professor, certainly not my job as a social worker, to tell people what to think about poverty. It is my job to give them the multiple theories and to help them construct their worldview. That's their job. So I give them the information, right? The library has the books. They don't tell the students which ones to read. They say, here are the books. And you can walk in and you can get books that agree with your perspective or books that disagree. What we try to do, particularly as educators, is to help students move beyond their comfort zone so that they're not just accessing information that is comfortable to them, We want to provide them with information that challenges their worldview. And we want them to be able to balance. And so I talk a lot in my classes, in my policy classes, and my community organization classes in general about being a good chess player. A good chess player doesn't just know the moves on their side of the board, right? A good chess player knows all of the moves. And so as I'm interacting and I'm trying to persuade a legislator to pass a piece of policy that I like, that I know this typically isn't something that they're looking at, I've already read all about them, right? I've done my background work, right? Christina talked about investigation. I've investigated everything that I need to know about them. I know the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then I know what I want to happen, right? I know my chess moves. Now, when I go in to talk to that legislator, I am going to use the information that I've gained. You might call it manipulation. I would call it joining. Use the information that I've gained to be able to connect with them so that they begin to develop empathy for the problem that I'm trying to get across to them. And so when I'm thinking about misinformation, I need to know the information to be able to determine whether it is misinformation or factual. And again, that is something that is socially constructed. So we try to help our students really by helping them, being clear with them. When you're writing, you're going to write about both sides of this issue because I want you to know all of the moves that are on the table. So that's kind of, I hope I've answered that question, Adam, and I'll end and hand it over to my colleague, Wes.
All right. Thank you much, Marina. Now, next up, political science professor Wes LeCrone, who is a keen observer of politics and government, particularly at the state level. He's a frequent commenter on elections in the popular news media and is editor, along with Michelle Atherton, of the book series Pennsylvania Politics and Policy. Now, in Wes's case, I have worked alongside him in different contexts, and I'm thrilled that he's agreed to be here. Dr. LeCrone has offered to talk about his approach to the social scientific study of facts and public opinion. There's a lot to say about how this research can be value-informed while still finding the truth through scientific method.
Thanks. Thanks a lot for having me. It's great to be on the panel. I really appreciate it. So one of the things as a political science professor is, not only do I teach majors, but also am part of the general education program at Widener University. And I think it's very important just to start out with the idea of why we're in college to begin with. I mean, most people say, well, I want to go out and get a job in my desired field. But one of the big things is talking about the liberal arts and being a liberally educated person. And I think that's so important to the context of misinformation and what we're talking about right here. And, if you take a look at some of the things that we talk about, why do I have to take science classes? Why do I have to take social sciences? Why do I have to take humanities? I'm this major, I don't need to do that. But when we get a little piece of all these different types of thinking, and when you have a professor who comes at something from a different angle and you learn the different ways of thinking, this is what helps us develop more critical thinking, more strategies of how to question reality and how to question information, and really helps us to understand the world that we live in a lot better. And that's really part and parcel of the education system that we have at Widener. And in all of our classes, we learn how to process information in different ways. And because we have this broad array of general education classes that we have to take, it really helps us to broaden our horizons beyond just the smaller major that we have. So just to start off, the whole process of college is about learning how to process information in ways that we never had thought of before. So that's important. I'd say within the context of political science as a social science, we take a different approach maybe than the scientific community would, in that we're not always just studying facts. We're also studying why people think the way that they do. And that's, the basic understanding of what a social science is trying to understand human behavior. So when we do that, particularly in teaching, what I generally do is one of two things. We'll sit down and try to understand why people across the political spectrum believe certain ideas to be true. And some of that is because their underlying ideology. Some of that is because they've basically just taken their partisanship and agreed to adhere to certain facts through what we call motivated reasoning. If it fits what I think, then I'm going to just keep thinking it, right? And try to understand different people. Now, there's a beauty and a value in that. One is, I tell all of our people, many of them are going to go on to have careers working for partisan organizations. Whether you're a Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, socialist, libertarian, whatever you are, you always have to understand what other people's arguments are, right? And that in and of itself, learning and respecting other people's arguments is one way to counter misinformation, because the whole circle of what other people believe, and that exposes you then to different areas of knowledge. In thinking about how, I'm just thinking about our senior research projects that people are working on right now all across the university. And, one of the things that we think about is there's nothing wrong with your values informing what you study, right? So, if you're interested in a specific public policy and you're guided by your values, there's nothing wrong with coming up with a question. But what we then use is a scientific method to examine that is value neutral. In other words, in social sciences and hard sciences and really any other academic study, our goal is to try to find the truth. And then once we find the truth, then we can work on ways to be able to go back and use our values as another tool. One of the things that I see as far as misinformation is concerned is that, we don't know enough facts. And that becomes a problem. And I just want to give you an idea of how this can become a problem. So I got some stats from a poll that was taken a couple of years ago about the U.S. budget, right? And people's misperceptions about the U.S. budget go a long way in helping us understand why people believe different things. So, for example, 30% of respondents argued that 20% or more of the government's budget goes for foreign humanitarian and development aid, right? Second, 22% of people believe that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting takes up 10% or more of the federal budget, all right? Now let's sit back and think about that for 1 second and what that actually means. First of all, this year's budget is $6.6 trillion, right? Let's take that as the base. Thinking in those terms, Big Bird's getting rich off the federal government, right? Because the Corporation for Public Broadcasting would be getting $600 billion if 10% of the federal budget was going to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, right? And when we think about what I think probably is a more serious problem, is if 20% or more was going for foreign humanitarian and development aid to other countries, that would be about $1.3 trillion, right? Why is that important? Well, people often say, why are we taking care of these people in other countries when we don't take care of our people at home? The reality is, it is about 0.6% of our budget that goes for foreign humanitarian aid, right? So we could cut all that out and it would make absolutely no difference to our budget. But people believe that that fat is in the budget, that we're helping people around the world, we're not taking care of our own people, and they believe that that portion of the budget should be cut, or get rid of PBS and the balance, the budget will be balanced. So these are the types of things where I don't think that we know enough information just on our base, and that we need to spend some more time, and we're obligated as educated citizens to do something there. The second thing I would point to is a case, right? And it's okay for facts to change. And I was relating a story yesterday about how I'm revising a book chapter on COVID and American federalism, and just what we've seen. It's difficult to pin down all the correct facts because the science is changing, right? And that's okay, because the longer we're in, this COVID period, the more we understand COVID and the more things develop. So if public officials who are doing the scientific research over time change what they say, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. What we're essentially saying is we're following the evidence, and we also should follow that evidence as we go through, and be willing to be able to accept that facts change over time the more we know about things. So I would just throw out two things that I personally use to help in dealing with misinformation. One is realize that there's a lot of people making a lot of money by using politics as entertainment, right? I personally never watch, other than election returns, any cable news programming, whether it's Fox, MSNBC, CNN, whatever, right? Stay away from that because, you can read a newspaper in 5 minutes and get more than you'll get off a half an hour of watching people arguing back and forth about quote unquote facts. So use good news services. If you do watch cable news, understand that it's there for an entertainment value. It's not there really to educate you. And then second, I would say slow down the news cycle. Spend certain portions of your day where you read high quality newspapers that have had time to think through and vet ideas and use really good background sources. And, try not to get your news off of social media all the time because that's not vetted, right? So those are my two kind of suggestions as you move forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Wes. Moving right along, our final speaker is Professor Angie Corbo. In addition to her many responsibilities as Chair of Communication Studies, Dr. Corbo is the current chair of Faculty Council Library Committee, and we at the library have been thrilled to have her as an advocate and partner helping to promote our work to the faculty and beyond. She co-leads with Professor Lloyd Baston the Summer Undergraduate Research Program, CIRCA, and she was one of the first people I met beyond the library when she invited me to dinner and drinks for non-tenure track faculty at the Iron Hill Brewery. Dr. Corbo has offered to talk about the unique professional responsibilities facing communication studies students, who often become the very producers and disseminators of the information we consume. Dr. Corbo, what have you been telling your students about the ethics of info and misinformation?
And
when do you feel like they've mastered it?
Well, first, thank you, Adam. That is just very kind. And it's been such a pleasure to work with the library faculty and staff and to serve on that committee. It provides a whole different insight to the university. So thank you to you and Christina for coordinating this and working with us. I echo, it's always fun to work with Marina and Wes. And I would also just like to say thank you because for anybody who's been on campus, the Wolf Graham Memorial Library has been a touchdown space. So while many of us have been safe and comfortable working online, you have been on the front lines for the students who have been on campus. So I really appreciate that, and I know our students do as well. So I did slides, and I will say that it's really to keep me on target. So I am going to time myself. And I'm just so happy to be with all of you today. So we were talking about this misinformation mashup, and I'm really glad that Marina and Wes kind of set the stage for you. What is the purpose of higher education? What do we think about services in society when it comes to social work and looking at key issues, wicked problems, as many of us refer to them. What does it mean in terms of politics and understanding how information is put out there? So I wanted to talk to you about being a media consumer. So not only is it just for our majors, and we love our comms and digital media informatics majors, but we also really like to think of all of us who are part of this. We're each media consumers. And so I thought I would just touch upon how information is generated, where it comes from in different sources, and how you can just be a little more intentional, like Wes was saying, about the information you're seeking out, and how both Marina and Wes were talking about how do you process that? And are you pulling in information that only matches your thoughts and your values? Or are you looking at information that might kind of push you a little bit to see the other side? I echo what Marina said about when you're lobbying, when you're meeting with other people, when you're going on an interview, information is so abundant. And I know we have a great team in the Wolfgram Library that can help you with that information literacy. The world is out there. Take the time to really pull that information in so you're better informed. From our industry perspective in communication studies, we often say in Freedom Hall, our major is about professional storytelling. So we do that in a variety of different ways. Certainly news, it's a collaboration of storytellers, how we're bringing information to the public, whether it's through print, which we know is on the decline, online, which comes to us from a variety of different ways, broadcast, cable, satellite, there's so many different ways. We'll talk a little bit about public relations and advertising. They both have a negative reputation at times, and hopefully by the end of this, I'll paint a different picture of how perhaps we could look at people in these professions as storytellers. We all know about social media. I won't spend as much time on that today, but there is a great difference between what you're getting on TikTok right now versus what you might get on LinkedIn. We know that YouTube has so many educational values right now, whether you're looking at a TED Talk or other recordings. And I think the pandemic has really taught us all to be a little more savvy in how we use the internet and the tools that are out there that can help us communicate. Certainly, graphic design and interpersonal communication are important ways to share information. Interpersonal communication can also lead to misinformation. And at the end of this presentation, I hope that your awareness level is raised so you can then decide what makes sense to you, what sounds right, and do you feel like you're fully informed. So first, we just have to acknowledge it can be a cruel world. Not everybody's world, and not all the time, certainly. But we know that we live in an environment where we're looking at public scrutiny. We're in a toxic climate at times. I know when I talk to students, they talk about, I don't like to watch the election coverage. I really don't like to look at all the political ads that are out there. It just is too toxic. And I agree. There is a certain level that I think exceeds beyond anything that's helpful to us. And it's important to recognize how advertisements can be persuasive and they can push people in a different direction. Again, we want to bring you back in line where you're being very thoughtful about the information and processing it to say, does this sound accurate? Does this sound like this is coming from a credible source? We know that there's a lack of civility, and not only does that exist within the media, but think about personal relationships. And bringing us back to a civil society is, I think, a goal of not only educators and social workers and policymakers, but I would encourage you to think about how can we identify ways to be our best selves, to come forward, to participate in the world where we can share information that's useful to everybody. We think about conflicting sources of information. Students, you might say, I was in, your class last semester and this is what we learned, but then when I went to another class, we talked about it from a different perspective. And that's healthy, and that's what Wes was talking about, kind of building that liberally educated mind, hearing how people from different perspectives view the world through a different lens, and understanding the credibility behind both arguments. So then going back to the idea, it's not our job to say this is how you should think and this is what you should memorize. It's the idea about saying what resonates for you and what seems to make sense within your context, within your life experiences. So conflicting information is not necessarily misinformation, but it is a way to challenge you to think about the world around you. And then we've heard the concept of fake news recently. It's not a new concept or term, it's just something that we're using more frequently. So, when you think about journalism, we have the Society for Professional Journalists, the SPJ, and they have a code of ethics. And I found this to be really useful when I look at information that's shared through newspapers, through broadcasts, through radio, through any of those public programs that are out there. So as a reporter, seek the truth and report it. So that puts the high standard, and this is what Dr. Leckrone was talking about. Go to those credible sources where you know that the information is being vetted. As a reporter, it's not one-stop shopping. You should be acquiring information, and you should be making sure that the information that you're getting is coming to you from credible sources, and in an ideal world, you're getting this from multiple sources. So that is incredibly important. We live in a very different world where with the 24/7 news cycle, we want to be the first to report it. I was actually very pleased with the majority of the reporting during this past presidential election cycle. I know it's still ongoing, but the broadcasters were, online, they had time to fill, and most of the channels were hesitant to call a state for a particular candidate simply because they wanted to get it right and not be first. For those of us who are old enough to remember, President Gore was president for a certain number of hours until we looked at Florida and realized that we had more work to do. So seek the truth and report it is so important when we think of journalism. We want to minimize harm. So if you're the person, if you're a journalist, if you're a paid communicator, you really need to think about how is your information, how is your message going to be received. If you are instilling a message that can create harm, I would say you are engaging in unethical behavior. Sometimes messages are not great. We hear the statistics for COVID. I think most of us are disappointed that we're not going to have the Thanksgiving that we typically have had in the past, but we do want to minimize harm. So the idea is have accurate information. Make sure it's vetted. Make sure that when you're saying it, there's not a level of injury that can be perceived within the greater public as they're hearing the information. Journalists should act independently. So if you're watching in the Philadelphia area, 6 ABC, or if you're watching ABC as a network, you'll often hear the phrase that ABC is part of Disney. Disney is their parent company, and they always want to identify those relationships so people don't question, if something happens at Disney, will ABC report it in a way that will be different from a competitor network? So you want to identify any association like that. And finally, be accountable and transparent. If there was an error, and we live in a world, as Dr. Leckrone was saying, facts change. The COVID chapter he's writing, things have greatly changed over the last few months. Be accountable, do the updating, write the retraction if you need it. So I'm going to jump to PR and advertising. So again, as professional storytellers, we are conveying information in different ways. So the biggest difference between the two, in advertising, you get the paid placement. So you are paying to have your information run exactly how you want it to run at the time where you place it. So think of all those political ads you heard over the last few weeks. Public relations puts out what we call uncontrolled information. We work on behalf of our client. We put out key messages and we put out information like today's event. That information was public relations. It was promoted through the Wolf Graham Memorial Library and other sources, and we're happy that you found us today. That information goes out there, and then people receive that information. I think both advertising and PR folks get a bad reputation because we are trying to persuade. We're trying to influence people to see a perspective that aligns with ours. So I would say as long as you are not trying to manipulate in a way that causes injury or harm, I think you're putting your information out there so a consumer or somebody who's listening to your information can make a decision based on the information that you're trying to provide. And then I'll just say, how does all of this affect our interpersonal relationship. Think about, are you trying to build a bridge or are you trying to create a barrier? So what is the purpose when you have a conversation with somebody and you're looking to prove them wrong? Is it the spirit of a healthy debate where people can learn more about your perspective, or is it a takedown? And when we think about interpersonal communication, when we talk about that in class and we talk about how we'll use interpersonal skills for the rest of our lives to be able to connect with people and information, it's important to us that you understand how to relate to other people and how partnerships can be really effective, even if you disagree with one another. So I think I'll stop my remarks at this point, but I'll be happy to answer any questions about communication as in the news media or communication as a process that we share among one another. So thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you to our panelists. Please show virtual appreciation on whatever channel you may be on. I know when I'm teaching on Zoom, I'll say, we're going to punctuate this right now, and I just appeal for some punctuation marks in the chat. So they can give me money, they can give me pound signs, they can give me exclamation points. It falls to me now to do sort of the quick and the less, maybe the unsexy part of promoting the library. And I'm going to share my screen and tell you about some of the places you can go for some of information that has been vetted, because that is what librarians do. We're your expert consultants in getting and finding things. So here's our homepage. Consider this your portal for research. If you start here, you're not going to be running into a paywall. You're going to be accessing resources that you've already paid for. If you go to one of the pop-ups, you'll be speaking to someone whose job it is to help you. You paid for them too. You see, you use the library, you get a better value for your tuition dollars. And especially when we're talking about the kind of, all right, I know there's good stuff in library databases. How does that compare to what's out on the internet? I really want to promote our subject guides. If you go to this tile-shaped blue link below the fold, these are custom web pages designed by librarians that give recommended sources for information. So, just looking for the first hit, communication studies. I'm going to give you, right on the first screen, you're going to have recommendations for one out of the over 150 databases we have. You can expect some research tips, free resources in the form of open education resources, and recommended journals. The same obtains not only for bear with me, please. Not only for disciplines and for subjects, but a lot of the tools that you use, since they're produced by different vendors, we're the support. And look, here are some of the people you've seen today and our colleagues. We're all just a phone call or an email away. We like to help, and it's literally what you're paying us to do. So with that part done, we're going to begin this taking questions from participants, and I'll pass the baton to Christina again.
Hello. If you hear a dog barking, it's mine. Sorry about that. I have gotten some congratulations from David Fendrick through YouTube. He says, great job, very interesting. And I have also gotten comments from Jill Boren through Facebook saying, this was fantastic. thank you to all of the wonderful panelists. So, not too many questions, but we have had 32 viewers on this live stream, and we hope to be able to save this video, add captions to the full thing, and post it on our various websites. If anyone does have further questions, what is the best way to get in touch with each of you? And we can start with Marina.
Just email mcbarnett@widener.edu. I just wanted to give one shout out. Jill Boren is she's the librarian connected with social work. And one of the things that students often don't understand is why things aren't the same. And so Jill does a really good job of coming into our classes every single semester and talking about which database. There's so many, right? I think you said, Adam, 150. The students have absolutely no idea which of those databases is the one that's going to get them to the information that's going to help them understand broadly using the tools that were talked about here for their papers and for their own information sources. And so if anybody's out there that has questions, the librarians are awesome at, one, identifying what are the best search bases for your particular profession. The other thing is they are wizards at language, knowing, I can type something in 10,000 times. Jill types it in once, and all of a sudden there's 50 articles right there that talk exactly about the thing that I need. They are masters at this. And so sometimes we wonder why libraries are important, particularly in this digital environment. It's not just the books. It's being able to be pointed to the books that are going to best help you articulate the arguments that you're trying to make. And so if there's anybody out there that needs that support, that Ask a Librarian pop-up is awesome. And they've done a tremendous amount of work just to be able to make that interface and connection with students. But also just, when we're able, going into the library, using the library as a touchdown space, remembering, you guys, that you get, help me understand, I think it's 400 prints, is that correct?
Yes.
That you get on campus. And so a lot of students are struggling to try to figure out, where do I print my stuff? Not your papers, but sometimes you just can't read everything online. Our eyeballs are hurting. But you guys have already paid for 400 prints. And so you can go to one of the touchdown spaces in the library to be able to print out things that you need for your study.
And we do have options now for remote printing. So you can send it through email. You can send a PDF file or a Word document through your email to the box where you scan your ID card, and it is there. You don't even have to stop in on our computers. You can use your laptop from home. But you should get there within 30 minutes of sending it, just to make sure it's still there.
But not this semester, right? Because you guys are closed as of 5:00 p.m. today.
We are closing at 5 p.m. today. That is true. Yes. So if you're quick, you can get all of that printing just taken care of. Lots of stuff to read for your Thanksgiving holidays.
As they would say, act now.
Yes, for sure. It's a limited time offer, like very limited. I do have one question through Facebook, and then I'm going to continue with how to best get in touch with all of the panelists. So this is a question from David, and he asks, how can non-college students get access to quality sources when they're often behind a paywall? That is an excellent question. Anyone feel enlightened to jump on this one right away?
Many libraries offer access, and so typically that access is $5, or if you can show hardship, it's free. And so you can often get access to libraries just by going in and filling out information. You typically can't take things out, but you are able to access all the resources of the library. Your local public library has amazing resources that you have just as, being a part of your community. And so you can go over and get access to ebooks and all these kinds of resources right in your own backyard.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I love using from the public library is LinkedIn Learning. You can teach yourself software, you can teach yourself study tips, you can teach yourself a dozen thousand different things on LinkedIn Learning, and all you need to access it in most communities is a public library card.
Yeah, and in some cases with the open access movement, the open educational resources movement, some of the databases we list are free to access. It's just, we're like a front end for it.
We're what you use to find it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that identified in any way, or is there a possibility for that to be identified?
In part, we have an icon that I believe looks like a little green padlock that's unlocked. And of course, the 800-pound gorillas in the movement are sort of the directory of open access books, the open textbook library, and we do have a dedicated subject guide for those materials.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I'll include the URL to the subject guide when I add the captions.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, Wes, did you want to give us a way to contact you if we have any further questions?
Sure. Just my email, which jwlacrone@widener.edu. Also, I'm on Twitter at Wesley Lacrone. I do a lot of work with kind of students writing blogs, so I've created a bunch of lists of sources of kind of vetted news organizations or reporters that I trust. So there's things about elections in Congress and presidencies if you want to follow those lists. And most of that stuff's not behind paywalls. So that's there. I would also like to give a shout out to the library as well, as Marina did. There's the beauty of, I said slow down the news cycle. The beauty of the library is not only do you have access to all these databases, but also in the event that there isn't something available immediately for you, you can use interlibrary loan. And that's perfect for getting articles or in some cases, newspaper, articles that you're looking for. And they're lightning fast. It's almost unbelievable. I've actually had stuff returned in the same day that I requested it. So, that's what I'm talking about when I say slow down the news cycle. Get real sources of news, and it's there with our library. I mean, I don't, as a scholar and as a teacher, I don't know where I'd be without the library. So I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. And Angie, actually, we got an interview with you that was just published today about handling Thanksgiving conflicts, maybe, or Thanksgiving situations. I thought that had a ton of real world application, especially for me personally. Where can we contact you for more information about what you've talked about here and what you've published today?
Thanks, Christina. You can reach me at my email address, which is amcorbo, Corbo. So that's my Widener account. Please reach out. I'd love to talk to you more. And I'd also, again, one of the things that we have that when we were talking about paywalls and other things, the Wolf Gray Memorial Library provides subscriptions to the New York Times, I believe the Washington Post, and USA Today. So if you're looking for media sources and you don't want to pay for a subscription and you're paying tuition for our students and for our faculty and staff, this is something that's available to you. I strongly encourage you to take advantage of that because those resources are so important. And when we talk about trusted sources, while any journalist could take you down a path that may not be the right one at first, you can really trust those sources, particularly the New York Times and the Washington Post. So again, I just thank you, and I echo all the positive things about when you talk about being part of a learning community. Widener as a whole offers that interconnectivity that really allows us to do collaborations like this. And I think when you can identify who's playing a part in that, it just brings all of us together a little bit more, even in these virtual times.
Thank you. And Adam, did you have a way to get in touch with you if someone has questions about information literacy and the
Sure.
library?
Sure, of course. A.A. Mizell, that's like gazelle, just with an M-A and M-I instead of a G-A. So AAMIZELLE at widener.edu. Yeah, let me know what part of this you are interested in. If you want a librarian to speak to your course, if for any faculty in the audience, let me know. We're always continuously working to improve our services. I look forward to it.
Thanks. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Yes, that's perfect. Thank you. Also, if anyone is interested in doing a live panel through Zoom, contact me. This has worked out hopefully pretty well. I think everything is still going. So since this is going to be our new normal, let me know if you need any assistance. And I also wanted to say that the library physically is going to be closing today at 5, but we are still available 6 days a week through our Chat Now feature. So you can find more about our hours for our services like Chat Now on the library's website. It is widener.edu/Wolfgram. And library hours are one of the first things once you scroll down the page. So thank you again for participating. Thank you, viewers, for coming. Thank you, Adam, for helping me plan all of this. I really, really appreciated it.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you to the panelists. This has come together in a way better than I'd hoped.
Yeah. Well.